G'day and welcome to ReDriven. Now, the funny thing about people that were the cool kids in high school is that once they're out of high school and have been exposed to the real world for a few years and their cool image begins to fade, you're generally just left with a bunch of losers that were far too reliant on their good looks in the first place. Can the same be said about the Fiat 500? Okay, look, for sure, when these are new, they're drenched in cool and they're one of the most stylish new cars you can buy, but what about when they're not new? What about when they're a few years old and have many thousands of kilometres on them? Are they reliable? What do they cost to own and operate? What do they like to live with on a daily basis? Are they just some loser that's been far too reliant on its good looks? And most importantly, should you buy one? Let's find out. Now, before we get deep into the Fiat 500, can you please do us a favour and hit those like, subscribe and bell icon buttons, and after the video, go and check us out on the socials. Now, this generation of Fiat 500 has been around since 2008 and it's received continual upgrades all through its life cycle, most notably in 2016 when it received a facelift. Although calling it a facelift might be overselling it because hardly anything changed. It's more like the automotive equivalent of this ducking to the bathroom and popping on a different shade of lipstick. We should also mention that the 500 has been and is available in a whole bunch of various performance-orientated Abarth versions. And look, they deserve their own special video and we'll do one of those in the future. Now, in this video, we will be focusing on the Australian variants of the Fiat 500, but if you're not from Australia, don't freak out because everything we're going to be going over should relate to 500s in your local market. Speaking of local markets, if you're buying one of these because of its beautiful Italian heritage and charm, it's important to know that these were never actually made in Italy. These are made in either Poland or Mexico, neither of which are very Italian. Here in Australia, the 500 has been available in a number of various trim levels and what seems like an endless array of special editions, depending on year and spec as either a hatchback or a soft top, with engines ranging from 900cc's to 1.4 litres, powering the front wheels via either a manual or a controversial automated manual transmission. Now, we'd love to go over every single graphic detail of each generation and update of Fiat 500, but that would just take far too long. But we have gathered all that information and we've put it in our handy ReDriven cheat sheets. Our cheat sheets are invaluable as they provide a full breakdown of the car's model range, its common problems, what you need to look out for before handing over your hard-earned cash, how much of that cash you should be handing over, and so much more. Check it out at redriven.com or in the link below. Now, if you already own a Fiat 500 or you're like a Fiat 500 expert and you've noticed that we've missed something in this video, please let us know in the comments below. We generally find it's those that own these cars that are the real experts. Like, we're doing our best to cover everything, but you guys are generally the real experts. So yeah, if we miss something, let us know in the comments. So, does it look good? Guys, this thing's all about the looks. There aren't many cars in the market that nail the whole kind of retro design styling thing, but the 500 absolutely nails it, in my opinion anyway. Now, in saying that, it's not exactly the most masculine of cars out there on the market, although these aftermarket alloy wheels kind of add a bit of brawn to it. Not much, just a tiny bit. Now, in terms of common issues and problems, there are a few. First up, the door handles. There are loads of reports of these things getting all loose and even the chrome finish kind of flaking off. This car hasn't had any of those problems, but stacks of reports of that. We also know of loads of reports of the washer jets no longer working. Not so much clogging up, just failing completely. Make sure you check out the tailgate to see if there's any chafing in the wiring. Make sure you pop the bonnet and look at the tops of the struts for any signs of rust. Now look, I know we're going to be covering the Abarth variants in a future video, and most of these don't have a body kit, but there were a couple of special editions that had like an Abarth style body kit fitted. The problem is, we know of loads of reports of those body kits becoming loose and even in worst case scenario, falling off. Speaking of falling off, we know of circumstances where the badges can fall off, the windscreen wipers can judder, and if it's got a panoramic roof, they can leak, and the convertible roofs can leak as well. Again, this car has suffered from none of those problems, but they happen on other ones. Now, we know of some owners that have reported that the paint is really susceptible to like motorbikes coming through the bush when you're trying to shoot. That's mad. That would be so much fun. Now we know of a few owners that have reported that the paint is really susceptible to marks like really easily, like bird poo or even leaves sitting on there for too long. And especially in our harsh Australian climate, the red and the black paint, if it isn't cared for or isn't garaged regularly, can fade pretty dramatically. As you can see, this car, spotless, sublime paint job. But yeah, this has been cared for and looked after. If it hasn't, it won't look like that. Finally, because the 500 is especially popular in like metropolitan and built up areas, make sure you check the alloys for any signs of gutter rash or curb damage. And if it's got heavy curb damage, go and get a wheel alignment. How's the interior? Well, just like the exterior, it is bloody gorgeous in here. They have nailed the design. So much so, in fact, that I wonder why other car companies don't take some design risks like this. Like, imagine if a Yaris looked like this inside. It'd be awesome. Although there are some quirky ergonomic things. Like, no matter what, I know this is subjective, but for me, I just can't quite get 100% comfortable in this seat. And then there's little things like where the seatbelt latch is, and even over your shoulder, it's just a bit of a nightmare. Obviously, you'd get used to it if you owned one of these, but just annoying. Even where the handbrake is versus the seat adjuster, like, you're not going to get them confused, but it's just a little bit complex down there. But then it has some awesome ergonomics like this, the distance between the gear knob and the steering wheel. It's a hand width apart, which is apparently in ergonomics terms, that's like perfect performance car distance there. Although I do have quite large hands. As far as wear and tear in this particular car, it's pretty amazing. Like, this is used on a daily basis. It hasn't got a lot of Ks on it, but the kilometres that it does have on it have been used around town and in pretty built up metropolitan areas. But seat wear and tear is great. The leather on the steering wheel is starting to discolour a little bit. If you're a coal miner or a chimney sweep, make sure you clean your hands before you use the white steering wheel. Easy enough to clean, but is starting to show a little bit of wear and tear. There's no squidge. Everything's a hard plastic. That brings the price down, obviously, but just feels a little bit on the cheap side. Speaking of things on the cheap side, the buttons, they don't feel, like, they all work really well, but they don't feel premium. They just feel a little bit cheap and nasty. As far as common problems and issues go, these things are renowned for rattling and squeaking and making some pretty horrible noises on the road, and we'll find out about those when we're on the road. We know of reports where the air conditioning blower fan can either start squealing and howling or completely fail. The problem is, to get to it, you've got to remove the entire dashboard, so it's going to be a really labour-intensive job, and labour costs money, so that's an expensive fix. There are also reports of interior trim pieces failing and just falling off. Again, this one, everything feels really, really tight. And also some of the seat mechanisms, they can also fail. So make sure you check those out. Now, in the back seat, I am 0.00934 of an American furlong tall. This is in my driving position, and as you can see, it's bloody squashy back here. I am super cramped in. Even headspace, like, there's not a lot of headroom. And because there's not a lot of room back here, there's not a lot of wear and tear back here. Most 500s are like this because it's bloody horrible in the back seat. So everything in this car is fantastic in the back, and it should be on most 500s. So how's the tech? Well, it'll depend on what year and spec 500 you're looking at, but anything prior to October 2018, it's a bit crap. We have read countless reports that Fiat's earlier Blue and Me infotainment systems commonly fail to work with iPhones in earlier cars. They can be an absolute nightmare to navigate, and they generally get a pretty negative rap. However, Uconnect, the system that replaced Blue and Me, while still not perfect, was a massive improvement. From October 2018, 500s received a 7-inch infotainment touchscreen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, plus a 7-inch TFT instrument cluster display. In terms of driver tech, rear parking sensors, cruise control with speed limiter and automatic climate control were also introduced. For the full details of which 500 gets what tech, just jump on ReDriven.com and check out the cheat sheet. So is it practical? Well, look, it is a really small car, but as far as the boot goes, it makes good use of its space. And also, these seats fold down, so yeah, it's pretty usable. Practicality in the back seat, pretty average. There's like a spot for your arm for an armrest. There's a mat pocket here. And if you're ultra flexible, you might be able to get to the cup holders between the two front seats. But besides that, not a lot of practicality. And practicality up front, you have some pretty shallow door bins. You've got a little door pocket up here. There's 4 cup holders in this front area, but they're all quite shallow and quite narrow. So if you have a little espresso, it might stay put. If you've got like a medium, say flat white, it's probably going to topple over. You've got a spot for a quarter of a sandwich up here, and the rest of the 3/4 of the sandwich can fit in this little secret cubby hole here. There's kind of it's not a glove box, it's like a glove shelf, I suppose. There's also this ingenious hidden drawer to hide any of your secrets. And that's about it. There's no, like, weirdly, there's nowhere specific for a smartphone. Like, everywhere it kind of like falls all over the place, but practicality's okay. So what goes wrong with these? Well, here in Australia, there's a bit of a joke that Fiat isn't actually an acronym for Fix It Again, Tony. But is there any truth to that? I'm not a mechanic. I'm not qualified to answer that question, but Jim is.
Aside from what we've learnt about the dozens of these we've had in the workshop, I reached out to a few people in the Fiat service departments, and more importantly, some people in the Fiat spare parts departments. And what we've learnt is that these things have some issues. First up, the automatics in these things. They're not really an automatic. They're a weird manual with an automatic shifting mechanism on them. The mechatronics unit is somewhat unreliable and very expensive to fix. They fail frequently and they are expensive to fix. And it controls the gearbox just like a manual. It operates a release bearing just like a manual, but it never actually sees neutral. So if you're stopped, it's got its foot on the clutch and this little bearing wears out. You've got to take the whole gearbox out just to replace this $5 bearing. In Australia, that's about a $1,200 round trip. Besides that, the thermostats. Now this affects the manuals and the autos. The thermostat itself is only about a $200 part, and there's probably an hour and a half labour to put it in, so maybe $450 all up, but really common. Besides that, mechanically, they're okay. They do have a lot of non-specific problems. The electronics and computers are, again, okay. A lot of widespread problems, but nothing really specific. If you're going to buy one, make sure it's comprehensively insured, because the cost of repairing smash damage on these is ridiculous. And if you're thinking about getting one, just avoid the auto, because the autos in these are shit.
So is it safe? Well, it is a tiny car, but it is loaded with safety features. And here's a voiceover of me telling you what it's got. Grazie, mate. The 500 comes with 7 airbags, ABS brakes, electronic stability control, anti-slip regulation, hydraulic brake assistance, and a hill holder. Again, for the full details, just check out the cheat sheets. So what's it like to drive? It's fun, like pretty much all the time. We actually reviewed a Suzuki Jimny recently. The link for that video is just up there. And this is like the small city car version of that car, because it just constantly exudes its own charisma and its own personality all the time. However, if you are expecting European levels of refinement, you're going to be disappointed. A Mazda 2 feels far more refined than this thing. But I feel like the lack of refinement kind of adds to the character and charm of the car. Like this is, for me, this is the perfect balance between like feeling like an old school classic, yet it still has the features of a new modern car, like an airbag to keep you safe. Now, the ride quality, even after a few years and many thousands of kilometers, is interesting. Like it's pretty bouncy and moves all over the place. But again, I feel like it adds to the character of the car. It makes it feel kind of energetic all the time. However, that does get pretty tiring, like on a freeway or a long open road. The constant moving and jiggling just gets a bit over the top. Now, the 500 has quite the reputation for rattles and squeaks in the interior, and in this car, nothing. It's silent. We've been over some typical Aussie roads, which mean they're pretty crap roads, and like there are really no rattles. There's a couple of little tiny things on the dashboard if you're on really rough roads, but this particular car, no rattles or squeaks. However, in other 500s I've driven, that wasn't the case. It almost sounds like there was like a little percussive orchestra of drummers just rolling their small little drum kits and drums down little sets of stairs inside the dashboard. Lots of rattles. Now the engine, look, it's zippy enough. It's not the most powerful thing in the world, and you do have to rev it out to kind of go anywhere. And if you want a fast one of these, get in a bath, but it does the job. Now this is a city car, and a really important point is it easy to park? Yes, immensely easy to park. Because it's so small in stature, it's super easy to place in even the tighter spots. Plus it has this button just here, which reduces the amount of resistance on the steering wheel, making it really light, so parking an absolute breeze. However, it doesn't have a rear view camera or parking sensors, but let's be honest, if you need those things in a car this small, maybe you shouldn't have a license. Pricing here in Australia kicks off from around about $5,000 for early model high kilometre examples, probably falling apart. And at the other end of the spectrum, you're looking in the high $20,000 range for either limited edition or pristine recent examples. Something like this, a 2014 Pop with pretty low Ks in pristine condition, you're going to be looking around about $10,000 to $12,000. And for pricing in some other markets, here's a graphic. Fiat have a claimed fuel consumption figure of anywhere from 3.8 to 6.3 litres per 100 kilometres, obviously depending on model, engine and spec. This particular 500 has a claimed consumption of 6.4 litres per 100 k's, but on this test, we're seeing figures over 8. Fiat offer a pretty underwhelming 3-year, 150,000 kilometre warranty on all 500s, and servicing is recommended at every 12 months or 15,000 kilometres. However, this might just be an Australian thing, but Fiat have a horrendously bad reputation when it comes to after-sales service. But these things have an awesome fan base, so if you do want some support besides Fiat, just jump online and check out some owners groups. They'll help you out. So, should you buy one? Well, look, a Mazda 2 or a Toyota Yaris are a far more sensible decision than buying a Fiat 500, but it almost feels like manufacturers like those guys just fail to inject any real charm or charisma into their budget-friendly small city cars. And if you want a small city car on a budget that has this level of charm and charisma, what else are you going to buy? Look, the 500 is far from perfect, but for all the reports of catastrophic mechanical failures, bits of bodywork and interior trim falling apart, and owners that feel betrayed by how terrible their 500 has been, there are cars like this one that have a faultless history, exhibit zero issues, and are owned by people that just adore their little Italian runabout. So, should you buy one? Yes. But only if you absolutely need a 500 in your life, and only if you find one in perfect condition, with a faultless service history, and have it thoroughly inspected by your local licensed mechanic, and maybe have some money put aside for when things go wrong. Look, yes, there are more sensible cars out there, but chances are if you're in the market for a 500, even the concept of sensible just bores you to tears. But guys, look, please be cautious, because while this one is pretty much perfect, no two 500s are built the same. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and hey, what did you think of the Fiat 500? Let us know in the comments below, and remember, hit those like, subscribe and bell icon buttons, and go and check us out on the socials. See you next time. Are they just that loser that is far too... Are they reliable? What do they cost to own and operate? What do they like to live with every... Come on. Come on, Morris. Now, if you already own a Fiat 500 or you're a 500 expert, I've gone blank on what I'm supposed to say. Hang on. In a different video down the track, but I've gone totally blank on the rest of it. Okay, no, I've got it. There we go. Now, look, I know we're covering baths on... me. Come on, Morris, let's go. Now, I know... okay. Now, I know... What am I trying to say, Joel? Jesus Christ. Hang on. If you get some bird droppings on it, or even a leaf... What am I trying to say? Fuck, hang on. Talking too fast. Good to go? Now, some owners... Now, we know of some owners that have reported that the paint is really susceptible. Here we go. So, is it safe? Well, look, it is a tiny car, but it is loaded with safety features. But here's a voiceover of... me. Come on. You're looking in the high $20,000 range for a recent... what am I trying to say?